Good morning. Morning. Good class. Okay. Today. Yes. Well, yesterday I talked a little bit about just basics of stock trading and so forth. Yes. Okay. One final point with that, and I might have mentioned it yesterday. A stock is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay you for it. Does that make sense? So if a company gets really bad news, like we were just watching here, Google is being sued by the U.S. government in an antitrust lawsuit, meaning that basically Google has a monopoly on search engine in the United States. Now, some of you might have heard of like DuckDuckGo or some other types of search engines. Some people might have, what do you call those? Where you download a thing so people can't see what your search, what do you call that? A VPN? Yeah. But Google has such a huge share of the search engine business. It's kind of takes you back to when there was one oil company, Standard Oil. There was one phone company, Bell Phone. Alexander Graham Bell, Bell Phone, okay? The government broke up those monopolies. In fact, they did it with Microsoft about 20 years ago. Because anytime you buy a computer, unless it's an Apple, what's the software that's used to run the computer? Yeah, Microsoft Windows, okay? So from time to time, the government will step in and do something about it, okay? With an antitrust lawsuit. Okay, so how did I get on that? What was I talking about? Stocks, yeah. So say Google, like they get broken up. What may happen to the value of their stock? It may tumble. So people might be trying to sell that, but nobody wants to buy it. So the value drops dramatically. Okay, which is what is going to happen with the stock market. Okay. So I got learning intentions over here today. You'll learn the faults leading up to the stock market crash, the resulting impacts. And then on the test, I'm not going to ask you to describe the causes of the stock market crash. Really, it's like gambling, speculation, trying to get rich quick. Okay. But we will eventually, I didn't get there in the other classes, talk about how the crash really affects banks. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit today, probably, but more solidly tomorrow. And you will have to write about that on the test, the bank failures. Okay, that's going to have a huge impact on the individual as well. Okay, so guys, October traditionally a bad month for the stock market. Things kind of slow down. You know, summer's over, it starts getting cool outside, less economic activity. We've had a lot of bad Octobers in the stock market, okay? Well, in October of 1929, it had been a poor month, and the market began to drop. Like, people started selling. They had made a lot of money. They started selling. On the 24th, which is known as Black Thursday, selling begins. People start panicking because nobody's buying when they're trying to sell. This is a problem. So J.P. Morgan that morning, it's like it got stuck. It's supposed to be over on the side. This is weird. J.P. Morgan, there he goes, and a bunch of other bankers in New York got together. They pulled together $240 million, and they started buying up stock. So now if you're trying to sell and somebody buys it, you're like, okay, whoo. You know, it's okay. Everything's okay. And the market rebounded. Okay. But there were some underlying factors there. Now, Hoover goes on the radio. He's now the president. Now, I know we didn't talk much about Coolidge because Coolidge didn't do much. Okay. So now Hoover's president. 1928, he gets elected. And so he's been in office about, because they take office in March. It's now October. So he's been in office about 6 months, 7 months. He tells the American people, hey, the economy's fine. You don't have to worry. Don't panic. What do people do when you tell them not to panic? They panic. So Friday's a pretty rough day. You turn around Monday. Things fell again on the 28th. And then on the 29th, which is known as Black Tuesday, the crap really hits the fan. Now, guys, this word crash, I think it gives you like a visual that it goes to zero. Like the stock market crashes all the way to the bottom. It doesn't do that. Not until 1932 will it reach its bottom. But as this says here, guys, the average top 50 biggest stocks in the country fell by about 50%. Okay? So, U.S. Steel is trading for $282 in September. It will eventually, by 1932, fall to $8 a share. U.S. Steel. Okay, that's how bad it gets eventually. Okay. Now that day, a record 16.5 million shares changed hands. Some people were selling stocks for pennies on the dollar, like taking whatever they could get, just trying to get out of the market. I mean, people lost 50, 60, 70% in some cases. Okay. So it got really bad. Big companies like General Motors, okay, Montgomery Ward, which is like a Sears, okay, all took big hits on that day. And you guys know what this machine is? It's not a telegraph. It's only used in New York City at the stock exchange. Called a ticker tape machine. As we were watching Bloomberg News Network, business news, you would see flashing up how much stock was selling for and so forth. This prints out how much stocks are selling for during the day. It keeps track. Okay? It's a little computer. I mean, somebody's got to type it in, and then it prints it out. Okay? At the end of the day, the next day, this paper is worthless. They don't need it. So it's just scrap paper. Ticker tape paper. So when they have a big celebration, like Charles Lindbergh returning from Paris after flying across the Atlantic, they have a parade called a ticker tape parade. You guys heard of this? Yes, you have, because it was in the video I showed on Friday. They had a big ticker tape parade for Lindbergh. When the Yankees win the World Series 27 times now, which is more than any other team, they have a ticker tape parade, okay, where people throw confetti out the windows from the skyscraper, okay? It's a New York thing, okay? After World War II, okay? Later on, I have in my slideshow the aftermath of the ticker tape parade after World War II. You could not see the street. It was covered. Yeah.
What year was it that they won their first World Series?
See, I had that question first hour. I mean, we could Google it. We could Google or Siri. What am I doing here? Siri, what year did the Yankees win their first World Series? 1923. They've won it 27 times. Yankees. How many World Series champions for the Yankees? 27. I'm going to bet the Dodgers are second. I don't know that for sure, but I was asked that question. Which team has won the second most World Series? St. Louis Cardinals. 11. Not even close. The Yankees. Okay. And they have ticker tape parade every time. Okay. All right. So, are we good here? All right. So, what I want to show you, a couple of things. By the way, my dad was born on October 21st, 1929. I know, it's like, man, your dad would be really old. Yes. My dad was 39 the day after I was born. So they waited. Now, you're the youngest of the Johnsons. How old were your mom and dad when you were born?
I think they were in their 40s.
In their 40s, yeah. So, like, when my dad was born, his dad was 44. Like, my grandfather served in World War I more than I. There were big gaps in life.
My grandfather was just too young to serve. He
Okay.
was like in boot camp, was about to go, and then the war ended.
And then,
War ended.
Yeah. Kind of, I mean, a little bit. All right. So, okay, the next slide here, I have some graphs, and I'll have a short video I want to show you as well. Okay. This shows you the timing of the market. Okay. So this goes back to 1927. Now, one thing I want to just remind you of, it'll be on the next slide again, which is, remember, worker wages. Wages went up 26%. Production went up 40%. So there was a slowdown. As early as 1927, the economy was not actually growing that fast. So you can see the market, though, the market continued to grow, and you see huge gains here, almost doubling in 1928. And in 1929, peaking up here. People were not looking at the value of the companies they were investing in. They were looking at the prices of the stock, and the prices of the stock kept going up, so more and more people started putting money in. You're going to learn this in the video, something called margin loans. People that didn't have money to invest would borrow money from the bank to invest in the stock market. Wait a second. Okay, I go down to Intrust Bank down the street after school, and I tell the people there, I'm like, listen, I need to borrow some money. I'm going to the casino tonight, and I'm betting on black. I only got $100, but I'd like to put $1,000 down. Can I borrow $900? I'll pay you back when I win. That's what they were doing. They were allowing people to put down 20%, borrow 80% to invest in the market. Well, what happens when it crashes? What happens to the banks? Are they going to get paid back? No. This is insanity. You understand? Okay. So this is Black Thursday. So then JP Morgan, they put all that money in, it kind of rebounds. And then this is Black Tuesday, 29th. Okay. Now look, it does kind of come back, it doesn't crash. It takes a huge hit. It doesn't crash to the bottom until you get here, 1932. Okay. So it's kind of like this, but all the way it's going down. Okay. Now, for those of you that invest, okay, especially people that try day trading, you're paying attention to your stocks every day, by the minute. You're day trading. Okay. You're trying to strike it rich quick. All right. You guys, when you're doing it for retirement, you leave it in there. You put it in, and you don't watch it every day. I don't look at my stuff every day. We go in to talk to our financial advisor 2 times a year. We recalibrate if necessary. As you get older, you take less risk. When you're young, like you guys, you have 45 years to recover from any risks that you take when you're young. You know what I mean? You have 45 years. Now, if you bought U.S. Steel stock or General Motors, which is still around, and it fell from $83 to $4. If you kept that General Motors stock from 1932, you know what that'd be worth today? millions. Okay. So you don't watch it, but if you're watching every day, this is what you're going to go through. You're gonna put your money in. You're gonna be optimistic. Hey, I feel good. I'm gonna invest some money. It starts to go up. You're excited. You're thrilled. Then you're like, man, I'm really smart. I'm good at this, right? Then it starts to go down. You're a little anxious. This isn't really happening. I'm losing money. Then you're scared. You're desperate. Well, I don't want to pull my money out now. Panic. You give into that panic. You capitulate, and then you're just despondent. Then it starts to turn around a little bit, still depressed. Oh, wait, I'm getting back to almost where I started. There's hope. Ooh, relief. And then optimism. And then it starts all over again. Okay. So you put it in there. Trust the people that are managing your money. Watch it grow over time. Okay. I got a little video here. It's going to mention margin loans. Okay. It's about 2 minutes long. 2.5. Where's the button? Where's the button? That's the button.
As the roaring 20s were drawing to an end, so too was an era of relative prosperity for many Americans. As early as 1926, the construction of new housing had decreased. Businesses had too much inventory and too few buyers. Nevertheless, an optimistic America wanted to believe that the good times would last forever, pointing to fortunes that were being made on the stock market. Even people with little money to spare wanted in on the action, and stockbrokers readily agreed to sell shares on a margin, where they would lend citizens money to buy stock. These investors figured the stock's price was bound to go up and up, allowing them to pay back the stock's original price tenfold. The constantly rising price of stocks cast a spell over the nation. Noon-hour traffic stood still as people eagerly awaited news of their improved finances. Even distinguished Yale University economist Irving Fisher made a bold speculation.
The nation is marching along a permanently high plateau of prosperity.
But the simple fact was that the price paid for many stocks was unduly out of proportion to the actual profitability of the companies who issued them, creating the illusion of increased value. On October 29, 1929, reality finally caught up with the stock market, and what went up came crashing back down. Panicked investors sold 16 million shares in a single day, many for just pennies a share. Millions of other stocks went unsold entirely on that afternoon, known as Black Tuesday. In just a matter of hours, the stock prices took such a nosedive that any gains made over the previous year vanished. The market's collapse was the most distressing downturn in the history of the New York Stock Exchange. So distressing, in fact, a number of investors committed suicide rather than face financial ruin.
Okay. Now that comment there about suicide, there were some people that, lost everything and killed themselves. But if you go back and look at statistics, there was no massive uptick in suicides after the stock market. Okay? You didn't have hundreds of people launching themselves off of Brooklyn Bridge or something like that. Okay? But sometimes the media kind of embellishes things a little bit. But anyhow, okay, so what was wrong? What was going wrong? I talked about the margin loans, okay, which you should know. People borrowing money to invest in the market that they would never be able to pay back, okay? Some smart people got out of the market before it dropped. One of those people was Joseph Kennedy, the Kennedy clan, okay, the father to JFK and Bobby Kennedy. Okay, Joseph Kennedy got out of the market before it dropped. So he got to keep all those gains he made, right? But there was not a lot of regulation of the stock market. Today, guys, you can still do margin loans, but they're regulated. So here, back then, you could put down 20% and borrow 80%. 80%, okay? Today, it's the opposite. Like, you could put down 80% today and borrow 20%. So those margin rates are regulated by the government. So is the stock market itself. There's something called the Securities and Exchange Commission that watches over the markets, okay? Which we will talk about when we get to the New Deal, okay? So what else was wrong here? Well, some of it we already talked about. The worker output and wages were imbalanced. And Hoover was wrong about the economy being in great shape or just fine. One of those problems is unequal distribution of wealth. So your top 36,000 wealthiest Americans had a combined income equal to the bottom 12 million. So you had a small number of people with a lot of money, and you had a lot of poor people. Now, these poor people, these bottom 12 million, were averaging about $1,500 a year when the cost of living was $2,000 a year. Now, if you're living below the cost of living, you're said to be living in what? Living in poverty. Now, I can tell you guys, there's roughly 120 million Americans in 1930, okay? So that's about a 10% poverty rate in the United States. Any idea what it is today? Like, what percentage of Americans live in poverty under the cost of living? It's about 1/6, which I'm not real good at math, but I think it's about 16%. That'd be about right. 1/6, 16%. Math people? Not you. So now let's be straight about something. Living in poverty in the United States today is a little bit different than living in poverty in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, or in Guatemala. Yes? Okay. The poor in this country have it pretty good. Nobody in this country starves to death. Okay? Nobody in this country starved to death during the Great Depression. Did people go hungry? Yes. Do people still go hungry today in this country? Yes. But nobody starves to death. Okay? All right. So, when this happened, guys, the wealthy, who a lot of them lost money in the market, they stopped spending. Like, they started hoarding their money. They stopped investing in new businesses or expanding existing businesses because they were scared, just like everybody else. So when the wealthy don't spend, guys. Anybody have family that live out at Cessna, work out at Cessna? Okay, well, you guys know Cessna builds private jets here, or, jets. And they also build smaller planes as well. Even the smaller planes, guys, are not cheap. Okay? And I don't know, how much a private jet going to cost you? Like $10 million? Okay? Guys, if the wealthy don't have $10 million, or they're not spending their $10 million, what happens at Cessna? They shut down production, guys. And people in Wichita lose their jobs, which has happened. Excuse me, 2008 to 2009, when we had the housing bubble burst, the stock market took a big dive. Guys, Cessna had layoffs. Okay? And a lot of people around here lost their jobs. So, if the economy's strong, and the rich are getting richer, which they always do, you sell more private jets. You guys ever traveled private jet? You guys have one? Somebody got one? Somebody in the family? It's kind of cool. It's kind of nice. You go, you know the Tarbells? You know the Tarbells? Davis Moore? Group? Well, his older brother, Skyler, played baseball with my son. And I don't know if you guys know the Hall family, Carl Hall. Okay, when Carl had his accident, they sent him to Colorado. Spinal cord injury. He was paralyzed. Tarbell got the private jet, and some of the dads from the baseball team, because Carl helped coach the team with me, we flew out on a private jet to Colorado. That's the way to travel. I mean, I'm telling you guys, if you make it big, it's nice. Okay. Now, if you fly on a private jet, for those of you who are of the tree hugging variety, environmentalist thinking people, okay, understand that people that fly on private jets, if they take 2 or 3 trips on that private jet, they will consume as much, produce as much CO carbon footprint as you will in an entire year. Okay. If you fly from New York to LA on one trip, you're producing as much carbon footprint as the average American in a whole year. Okay, so I love it when Hollywood people like Leonardo DiCaprio, who flies around on a private jet, wants to preach to us about our carbon footprint. John Kerry's another one. I mean, I'm like, really? Oh, well, I'm doing it for the good. At least Greta. You guys know Greta? What's her name? What? Yeah, yeah. At least she takes a boat across. You know, she sails across the Atlantic when she comes over. I mean, you got to respect that. You know, I don't really like Greta, but I respect that. You know, she puts her money where her mouth is. I think. I don't know what she does. You know, the rest of it. You know what I mean? Okay, sorry. Don't get me started. All right. Now, okay. The middle class, which, guys, is substantial during this time period, doesn't have enough purchasing power to kind of get the economy going again. So we're kind of in some trouble here, guys. Things are going to get bad. Okay. So let's look at some of the other problems. Now, we've already talked about these. Okay, war, debts, and tariffs. So, guys, now we're up to 4 causes of the Great Depression. Can you remember any of them? Tariffs, wages not keeping pace with production, war debts, and the last one, the crash. Okay, we got 4. Okay. Now, I got 2 more. I mean, actually, I just gave you one, but it'll be more defined on a later slide. Unequal distribution of wealth. Okay. Now, think about the unequal distribution of wealth today. So now today, we don't just have millionaires. We've got billionaires. Right? You know some of their names. Okay. Bezos, Gates, Musk, yes. Donald Trump is not a billionaire. He's a millionaire. And we have a lot of those. Okay. And if you guys play your cards right and invest, one day you'll be a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. My wife and I should say, are millionaires. Now, that doesn't mean we make $1 million a year. Okay. It means we have a net worth of over $1 million. It's probably some of your parents do as well. With investments, the real estate, you know, because, guys, housing, you know, if you live in a pretty nice house, probably your family has a net worth over $1 million. Okay. It's not as hard as it used to be to become. I'm just saying. You can do it. Being a school teacher, diocese, like I said. All right. War debts, tariffs. Other nations couldn't afford to buy our products. We lay off our workers. We can't buy their products because they put stuff on us. Okay? They put tariffs on us. Now, let's talk about these holding companies. This is another really stupid thing. So as the stock market continued to climb, let's say Henry Ford issues some stock. Let's say Ford Motor Company stock is selling for $50 a share, and he offers 1,000 shares. So that's $50,000 Ford just made by issuing 1,000 shares. Now, what is Ford going to do with that $50,000? They could expand their operations, make more cars, maybe build a car named after Henry's son, Edsel. Okay? Or Ford take that money, this $50,000, and invest it in U.S. Steel. Because U.S. Steel stock just keeps going up. Ford could take the money that he made from his stock sale, invest it in somebody else's stock, and make money with that $50,000. Just another way to make money. This is a holding company. So sell their own stock to buy other people's stock. Now, what happens when this drops to $8 a share? What happens to this $50? $50,000. Poof. Gone. So when people found out that businesses were doing this, confidence in business, like these shysters, these greedy bastards, I bought their stock and they spent it on somebody else's stock. Okay? They didn't invest in the company. Again, you need some regulations on this stuff. Okay? There were no regulations on this. All right, next one is just the gambling of it all, guys. Speculation, okay? The stock market itself. What do they call those people that went out to look for gold? California. 1849, right? They were speculators. They left everything behind where they were living, dropped everything, went to California speculating that they were going to find gold and make it big. They were going to be rich. How many actually got rich? Not very many. So, citizens didn't realize they were just looking at the price of the stock, not the value of the national product as a whole, what our economy was looking like, okay? So the stock market's a funny thing. I want to explain something to you, what's going on in the United States right now. Let's go back to 2008, 2009. This is the last major hiccup we had with the stock market. Okay, so if you look at this chart, okay, you see a big drop right here. Okay, 2008. Okay, 2009. And it's going to take, if I draw a line across here, it's going to take several years to get back to where it was. Okay? So, we had what was called the housing bubble. Right? The government. Any guys ever see this movie called The Big Short? Some of you have seen it? Yeah. You see it in class, like Wager show it to you? Okay. You saw it on your own? Okay. Now, it's a really good movie. Now, it's weird because they put this like woman in a bathtub like at odd times. This sexy woman in a bathtub. Yes. I like, why? Okay, it's kind of like Oppenheimer. You guys see Oppenheimer? It's like, okay, really good movie. What's up with the sex scenes? Like, why? You didn't need that. Okay? I don't know. You know, I'm like, okay, all right, there's a sex scene, you know. Awkward. All right, sorry, what am I talking about? Okay, 2008. So the government, what the government was trying to do was help people achieve the American dream. We kind of talked about the American dream before. Why? What was the American dream for a lot of people? Owning their own home. So the government wants to help with that. So how does the government help individuals buy homes? Well, they convince the people that loan money, the mortgage companies, to give loans to people. Okay? Because most people don't have $200,000 in cash to buy a house. So you get a mortgage, yes? So you need these companies that loan people money. And one way to make it cheaper for them to loan money is to lower interest rates. Okay? Now, who prints the money? The government, the Treasury Department prints the money, okay? And then there's this organization called the Federal Reserve, okay? The Federal Reserve is kind of its own entity. It's not really under the executive branch. It's not really under the legislative branch. And it's just like this own entity. And they set the interest rates. That where the government who prints the money, they're going to loan this money to banks. What kind of banks are we talking about? We're talking about Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. We're talking big banks. Even Intrust Bank, which is, it's a regional bank. Okay? So we're talking about the percentage. So if you lower interest rates, the banks will borrow more money. Because it's cheap. Think about this. If I told you you can get 6% return in the stock market and I can borrow money at 2%, why don't I borrow $100,000, invest in the stock market? I'll get a better rate of return in the stock market than what I have to pay back to the bank, and I'll just make free money. Might work. Okay? Now, then the banks lend it to the individual. Okay? Individual. Okay? You and I. Now we call that a mortgage. Okay? Now, this is what you go to a bank to borrow money for a house. What are they going to ask you? How much money do you make? Well, I teach in the Wichita Diocese. The other question I ask you is, how long have you worked there? What is your credit score? When you've borrowed money before, have you paid it back? Have you paid it back on time? I have a great credit score. I have a better credit score than my wife. Mine's over 8, it's like 840. She doesn't go much higher than that. So if I go to the bank and ask for money, they're going to give me money because I have a long track record of paying back my debts on time. If you don't, they're less likely to give you money. But the government wants you to borrow money. The government wants them to loan you money. So the government put pressure on the banks to loan individuals money that they probably shouldn't have been borrowing. Now, guys, I could borrow a lot of money. My wife and I could live in a much bigger house. And the banks would say, yes, you can afford this. No, I can't. No, I don't want to live by the skin of my teeth. I want to have a buffer. You know what I mean? I don't need a mortgage payment that's $2,000 a month. I don't want that. I don't want to live like that, beyond my means. My dad did that. We're still paying off his house. Died in 2003. Okay? So, listen, they started loaning money to people that probably couldn't pay it back. Now, one way for the banks to, recoup some of that risk is to charge a higher interest rate to those borrowers. Or they'll do what's called a flexible interest rate that could go up or down, which means each month your payment could go down, which is great. If interest rates go down, it's variable. But if they go up, your payment goes up. So you're used to paying $800 a month, and then all of a sudden, your mortgage bill comes and it's $1,000 a month. Now, if you're just barely scraping by, and you probably shouldn't have got that loan to begin with, you're in trouble. When you can't pay back your mortgage, what happens? They foreclose. The bank owns the house until you pay it off. And when I say pay it off, that means every last penny. The bank owns the house. Okay? This is what happened in 2008, in 2009. The government was pushing banks to give loans to people that shouldn't get them. Okay? And guys, I'm not trying to be mean here, but there was a racial component to this as well. So lenders were not lending to minorities as much as they were to white people. Follow me on this? So the Congress was like, you need to loan money to minorities. Now, it's not just minorities, it's everybody. Riskier lenders, okay? There's plenty of minorities that are not risky lenders, borrowers, okay? I'm not trying to, but I'm telling you there was a racial component, okay? So what happens is when interest rates go up, and by the way, never get a mortgage with a variable interest rate. Because it could go up and unexpectedly you not be able to pay your rent, your mortgage. Okay, not your rent, your mortgage. Okay, and this is what happens. So, what the big banks were doing is they were buying like 500 mortgages. Now, these mortgage companies, they got all these mortgages, people paying in each month. That's cash flow, baby. Okay, you got $800,000, $1,500 a month coming in every month. It's cash. It's cash. So the big banks, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, they started buying up bundles of 500 mortgages. They sold these on the stock market, and they bought them. So these big banks had all these mortgages. They're getting all this cash flow, okay? I'm talking Bank of America here. But inside that bundle of 500 mortgages were a lot of bad loans. And when the interest rates ticked up, and people couldn't pay their mortgages, the big banks were stuck with all these houses. The fastest growing city in America in the early 2000s was Las Vegas, Nevada. And they were building $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses left and right. And people were moving to Vegas. Well, guys, a bunch of these mortgages went bust, and you had say you had, 30 houses in this neighborhood. You could have 10 of them where the mortgage went back and they foreclosed. The housing values kept going up and up and up like they are now. So you bought a $500,000 house in Vegas, okay? The housing bubble happens. Your neighbors foreclose. Your neighbors foreclose. Neighbors foreclose. Okay, so you got this 30-house neighborhood. 10 of them are foreclosed. Nobody's buying them. What happens to the value of those houses that have been foreclosed? They're $500,000 houses too. The bank wants to sell them, so they drop the cost. What happens to the value of your house? Your $500,000 house is now worth $400,000. Now, when you bought that house, you put down $50,000 and you borrowed $450,000 to buy that house. Now you owe more on that house than your house is worth. I don't know about you, I'm going to stop paying that mortgage and I'm going to leave. So people started abandoning their property. This is called being upside down in your mortgage. You owe more on it than it's worth. Not a good thing. So this starts happening, guys, California, Florida, really bad. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of foreclosures. And these big banks are in trouble. They're going under. So, out to the savior. Government's going to bail out these big banks with our tax dollars. Okay? So, we have to be careful, guys. Now, right now, interest rates are high. Okay? 7% for a 30-year mortgage. This is why you're making more money in your savings account now than you were 2 years ago. Okay, because interest rates are up. Now the bank's only giving you 2, maybe 3% when they're charging other people 7%. So you do the math. Okay. Now, why is the interest rate going up? Because the Federal Reserve wants to slow down the economy because of all the inflation. The prices have just kept going up and up and up. And again, new numbers out today. They're not up a lot, but they're still going up. Okay. And then you saw the 20-cent gas price jump this week. Okay. I was actually warned about that Friday night by a guy. He said, you need to buy gas this weekend, fill up your tank because it's going to go up. Saudi Arabia cut its oil production. Less supply, demand stays the same, price goes up. Okay. So, we are actually right now, guys, the Federal Reserve is trying to slow down our economy, almost put us into a recession just to bring inflation under control. Okay. And so there could be some difficult times ahead for people losing their jobs and so forth because of an economic slowdown. I talked about Cessna, get an economic slowdown. They're not going to be building a lot of private planes for people. Okay. So that, and then that dovetails into worse things. This is what happens here. It's like a perfect storm. Okay. Now, at the peak of the Depression, guys, 1932, unemployment was about 25%. Any idea what unemployment is today? It's less than 4%. So basically, anybody that wants to find a full-time job can find one. They would consider that full employment. Anything under like 4.5%. Basically, you can find a job. Okay. Now, that's starting to change a little bit. We're starting to see some layoffs. And how do you tell? Well, each month, the government will tell us how many people filed for unemployment insurance. And then when you get a new job, you got to fill out the forms for Social Security, and so they know how many jobs were created as well that month. Okay? And the numbers are starting to slip, which is what they're trying to do. Trying to slow us down on purpose, which sucks for people losing their job. But they've got to get inflation under control. Okay? So the president has no power over the Federal Reserve. The Congress has no power over the Federal Reserve. This guy, the Federal Reserve chairman, makes his own decisions on it. So this is likely to continue to go up. As inflation keeps going up, this is going to keep going up until they put us into a recession. Yeah.
I was going to ask who chooses who the chairman is.
The president does. The current Federal Reserve Board chairman is Jerome Powell. So he gives updates every couple of weeks. He's looking at the employment numbers, looking at the inflation numbers, and he's going to decide whether to keep this up. Okay? Guys, 2 years ago, these interest rates, you could get a 30-year for under 4, like 3.25, like cheap money, man. Great time to buy a house, great time to sell a house. Like people had bidding wars. You have a house go 2 years ago, house go for sale in your neighborhood, it was gone within a day. Sold like that, and you got above asking price. Now, my neighbor just sold his, got above asking price. Why? There's a housing shortage in this country right now. We've let in, President Biden's let in over 5 million people in less than 3 years into this country. And cities like New York and Chicago don't know what to do with all these people. Seriously, they've got tent cities. In New York City, they like a soccer complex where the kids would play on the weekends. They built these big tent cities for migrants to live in. They can't work. They won't give them work visas. So they're all living off the government tip. We're all paying for it. We're feeding, we're housing, healthcare for 5 million people that we weren't 2 years ago. Now, if you let them work and you let them pay taxes, then that's a little less of a burden on society. What are we doing? I don't know. I'm not in charge. But we got some problems. So, all right, I went off the deep end there.